Victor Harlow, a quiet, polite man in Toronto's Riverdale neighborhood, seemed ordinary to everyone. Neighbors like Claire Thompson, the local cafe owner, and Detective Marcus Lee, who would later investigate him, never suspected the darkness hiding behind his calm exterior. Beneath the floors of his two-story brick house, Victor meticulously collected belongings of the missing. People like delivery worker Ethan Parker, student Laura Mitchell, and office assistant Daniel Reyes. When journalist Sophie Grant began connecting the disappearances, the horrifying truth emerged. Victor's obsession had escalated from collecting objects to murder. This is the chilling story of a man who thought no one would notice. Toronto's quiet streets often gave the illusion of safety, a city of familiar faces and orderly neighborhoods where life moved at its usual pace. In Riverdale, a two-story brick house with a neatly trimmed lawn seemed to epitomize that calm. Its owner, Victor Harlow, lived a life that, to outsiders, appeared normal, even mundane. He was polite to neighbors, kept his property immaculate, and maintained a quiet routine. No one would have guessed that behind the windows and the closed doors, a dark obsession was quietly taking shape. Victor's daily life was meticulously structured. He began mornings with coffee from the corner cafe, exchanged brief pleasantries with shopkeepers, and spent hours at home tending to tasks that seemed ordinary, cleaning, reading, or organizing household items. But what looked like normalcy was only a carefully constructed facade. Behind the walls of the house, Victor's fascination with control and secrecy was growing. Objects that belonged to other people, trinkets, letters, personal items, began to accumulate, hidden away in cupboards, beneath floorboards, and inside false panels. Each item told a story he could not experience firsthand, but he possessed it, as if holding the fragments of someone else's life gave him some quiet satisfaction. At first, the neighborhood noticed nothing unusual. A young delivery worker went missing one evening, and life went on. Police were slow to act, assuming he had moved or missed a shift. Victor's movements were always controlled and deliberate. He left no trace, and his timing ensured that no suspicion fell on him. As weeks passed, other disappearances were reported, each carefully timed and executed. Friends and family grew concerned, but the lack of evidence kept the cases unresolved. To them, the missing were simply gone, without explanation, and the quiet house at the end of the street remained untouched by doubt. Inside, Victor's obsession was expanding. He cataloged every item he collected, labeling each with precise notes on where it came from and what it represented. He studied the routines of the people he watched, memorizing habits, anticipating movements. His home, a picture of normalcy to outsiders, was in reality a labyrinth of secrets. Hidden compartments, false walls, and carefully concealed spaces were filled with the belongings of the missing. Each addition fueled his sense of invulnerability, convincing him that he could continue without detection. There was a chilling order to his world. Even in his private moments, Victor's mind was occupied with planning, adjusting details, and imagining contingencies. The more meticulous he became, the more the line between obsession and compulsion blurred. It was not violence he craved, but control, the ability to possess fragments of life without the messiness of human connection. To him, the quiet, unassuming house was not just a home. It was a stage, a sanctuary, and a vault for his secrets. And in that calm, ordinary neighborhood, he believed, no one would ever notice. The first signs that something was wrong were almost imperceptible. Neighbors began to notice small oddities around Victor's house. Lights flickered at unusual hours, sometimes remaining on all night despite the house appearing empty. Faint noises, too deliberate to be the settling of old floors, echoed through the walls. Packages arrived from unknown senders, piling up on the porch, and Victor carried them inside without explanation. Yet his polite smile and calm demeanor kept suspicion at bay. No one could imagine that behind the normal exterior, darkness was quietly growing. It was a local journalist who first began connecting the dots. They had been following rumors of disappearances across Toronto, stories that seemed unconnected at first. But patterns began to emerge. The missing individuals had all been seen near Victor's neighborhood before vanishing. Social media posts, interviews with friends, and neighborhood surveillance footage slowly revealed a timeline that led straight to the Riverdale house. The journalist's curiosity, paired with meticulous research, was the first real crack in Victor's carefully constructed facade. Victor's obsession had rules, a precision to every act. He didn't act impulsively or out of anger. Everything he did was calculated. Each disappearance was chosen deliberately, each moment carefully timed to avoid witnesses. He studied police patterns, anticipated investigations, and even accounted for the city's surveillance cameras. It was not madness but method, and it made him nearly invisible in a world that trusted appearances. But even the most meticulous plans have flaws. One night, a neighbor returned home unexpectedly and saw Victor carrying a large wrapped object from the garage to his car. For a split second, his composure faltered. Panic flashed in his eyes before he regained control. But that fleeting moment was enough to leave a lingering suspicion. Though no one could pinpoint what had been seen, that brief exposure began to ripple outward, and the first threads of his carefully hidden life started to unravel. The police began investigating Victor more closely. They obtained warrants, examined his property, and discovered evidence that went far beyond mere suspicion. Hidden rooms and false floors concealed not just objects, but a meticulously documented archive of his victims' lives. Items were labeled, sorted, and stored with a level of detail that suggested a mind obsessed with cataloging, understanding, and controlling. The house, once ordinary, became a disturbing record of years of careful preparation and secret activity. Every discovery amplified the horror. Investigators realized that Victor had operated under the illusion that ordinary life provided a perfect cover. He had relied on routine, on neighbors' assumptions, and on the belief that no one would question a man who seemed polite, quiet, and unobtrusive. And yet in that same ordinariness, the cracks were beginning to show. The calm neighborhood streets, once taken for granted, now hid evidence of obsession, manipulation, and a growing collection of secrets. Victor had believed that no one would notice. But with each clue uncovered, the illusion of invisibility was collapsing. Toronto's quiet Riverdale neighborhood had been a stage for something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined, and the world was only beginning to see the extent of the darkness that had thrived so close to home. The discovery in Victor's house shocked everyone involved in the investigation. Beneath the floorboards of the basement, hidden behind a false panel, lay the first body. The young delivery worker who had disappeared months earlier was there, preserved in a way that suggested deliberate planning. The realization struck the investigators with a chilling clarity. Victor had moved beyond collecting personal items. His obsession had escalated into murder, and the methodical precision with which he concealed his crime revealed a mind both calculating and remorseless. As forensic teams worked to uncover more evidence, it became clear that the house was a labyrinth of secrets. Every room had hidden compartments, every closet a potential hiding place for items taken from the missing. Some were ordinary belongings, wallets, watches, letters. Others were more personal, carrying the intimate traces of lives abruptly ended or interrupted. It was as if Victor had constructed a museum of stolen existences, catalogued and preserved with obsessive care. Each discovery intensified the horror, and the investigators realized they were only beginning to comprehend the scale of his actions. Victor's life outside the house began to be examined in detail. His past, once unremarkable, revealed subtle signs of early warning. Childhood reports mentioned his fascination with control and an unusual detachment from others. Teachers and neighbors recalled a boy who seemed polite but emotionally distant, someone who rarely shared feelings or formed lasting friendships. Over time, those early tendencies had evolved into a meticulous, coldly calculated behavior. Every step he had taken as an adult was informed by an obsession with control, with the ability to manipulate and possess while remaining invisible. The investigation revealed patterns in his crimes. Victor did not choose victims randomly. Each disappearance was deliberate, each selection based on careful observation and timing. He studied routines, understood law enforcement methods, and anticipated delays in investigations. No detail was too small to escape his notice. The level of planning unnerved detectives who had encountered countless criminal minds, yet rarely had they seen one so precise, so controlled, and so devoid of emotional motivation beyond compulsion. As the evidence mounted, the public became gripped by the story. Media outlets described Victor's house as a chilling reflection of obsession turned deadly. People spoke of the ordinary man who had hidden unimaginable darkness behind polite smiles and quiet gestures. Families of the missing watched anxiously as each revelation brought more clarity and more horror. The ordinary streets of Riverdale were forever changed, transformed in the public imagination into a place where evil had thrived undetected. Quietly, for months. The psychological implications of Victor's actions were staggering. Experts described a mind driven not by passion or anger, but by a relentless need for control and possession. Every object, every hidden item, every body concealed beneath floorboards was evidence of his obsession with orchestrating life from the shadows. His meticulous planning, paired with a chilling lack of empathy, created a perfect storm of horror that even the most seasoned investigators struggled to comprehend. In the midst of the investigation, the question lingered: how had Victor maintained such secrecy for so long? Every detail uncovered only deepened the mystery. Toronto's Riverdale neighborhood, once a symbol of ordinary life, now carried a shadow that refused to fade. The ordinary man they had all known had been living among them, quietly, methodically, thinking no one would notice. And for months, he had succeeded. Victor's arrest was almost anticlimactic, yet it sent a ripple of shock through Toronto. When the police entered his home, he offered no resistance, standing calmly as they led him away. His composure unnerved even the most experienced detectives. There was no outburst, no attempt to justify his actions, no plea for mercy. It was as if he had anticipated this moment, accepted it, and quietly waited for it to arrive. The man who had hidden his darkness so carefully now became a spectacle, a figure of chilling stillness in the glare of public attention. The trial captivated the nation. Each day brought new revelations, detailing the extent of Victor's obsession and the meticulous planning behind every disappearance. Investigators described the hidden compartments in his house, the catalogued items, and the preserved bodies. Photographs, diagrams, and forensic reports painted a picture of a mind that had been planning for years, one step ahead of the world around him. Experts testified about his psychological profile. A man driven by control and compulsion, entirely devoid of empathy, capable of unimaginable cruelty without a hint of remorse. The public was both horrified and fascinated. Families of the victims sat in the courtroom holding photographs and letters, watching as every detail of their loved ones' disappearances was laid bare. Media coverage amplified the story, and the city of Toronto grappled with the realization that someone so ordinary could hide such darkness for so long. Streets, parks, and homes once thought safe were suddenly viewed through a lens of suspicion. The ordinary had become extraordinary in its horror, and neighbors who had waved to Victor for years now questioned how well they had really known him. During the trial, more hidden rooms and secret caches were discovered, each revealing another layer of Victor's obsession. Notes meticulously documenting routines, timelines, and personal details of the missing made it clear that his crimes were not acts of opportunity, but the product of years of calculation. Every detail mattered to him, and every action was part of a larger, terrifying design. The house itself, once an unremarkable residence, had become a symbol of methodical evil, a monument to the lengths one man would go to satisfy his obsession. Psychologists and criminologists spoke in hushed tones about the implications of Victor's case. He demonstrated a rare combination of intelligence, patience, and detachment. His ability to blend into ordinary society while maintaining a secret life of calculated horror made him both fascinating and deeply frightening. Experts emphasized that his case was a stark warning. Evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind politeness, behind routine, behind the everyday smiles that make a neighborhood feel safe. Finally, the verdict arrived. Victor Harlow was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent, the weight of the sentence hanging heavily over everyone present. For some it was relief. For others, it was the realization that the ordinary man they had seen every day had lived among them with an unimaginable secret. The story of Victor Harlow became a cautionary tale, a reminder that darkness can exist in the most mundane of places, and that vigilance, though it cannot erase horror, is essential to prevent it. Years passed, but Victor Harlow's name remained synonymous with terror across Canada. The Riverdale neighborhood, once a symbol of quiet suburban life, had been forever marked by his actions. The house where he had meticulously hidden his obsessions was demolished, its foundations torn apart, leaving only whispers of the secrets it had concealed. Yet the impact of Victor's crimes lingered, etched into the memories of the families he had harmed, the investigators who had pursued him, and the city that had trusted ordinary appearances for far too long. For the families of his victims, closure was complicated and incomplete. Every discovery during the investigation, every hidden room and catalogued item, had left them with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Therapy and counseling provided some relief, but the knowledge of what had occurred and the realization that it had happened so close to home created a lingering sense of unease. Parents watched their children more cautiously, neighbors scrutinized the familiar streets, and a general wariness settled over Riverdale. Life had moved on, but the shadow of Victor's actions remained. Psychologists, criminologists, and law enforcement officials analyzed the case extensively. Victor's methods, meticulous planning, and complete detachment from empathy became a study in the pathology of obsession and control. His behavior demonstrated that evil can thrive in silence, in subtlety, in the ordinary gestures that hide extraordinary malice. Experts emphasized that the warning signs, his fascination with control, emotional detachment, and secretive tendencies, could be recognized if people remained vigilant. His story became part of training for law enforcement and mental health professionals, a chilling reminder that appearances can deceive. Public fascination with the case never waned. True crime enthusiasts dissected every detail, from the hidden compartments in the house to the catalogued items and the carefully timed disappearances. Documentaries, articles, and podcasts explored the narrative, delving into the mind of a man who had managed to live among ordinary people while orchestrating a series of meticulously concealed crimes. Discussions in public forums and social media sparked debate about human nature, vigilance, and the potential for darkness to exist unnoticed in everyday life. Victor himself remained in prison, a figure of quiet menace. Reports described him as composed, almost indifferent to the notoriety he had gained. He maintained the same cold detachment that had allowed him to operate undetected for so long. In a strange way, even in confinement, he retained control, his legacy now reaching beyond his immediate actions to influence how the city and the country viewed safety, trust, and ordinary life. Ultimately, the story of Victor Harlow became a cautionary tale that extended far beyond the Riverdale neighborhood. It served as a stark reminder that evil does not always announce itself. It can hide behind the polite nods, quiet smiles, and predictable routines of everyday life. Toronto and Canada as a whole would never forget how one man's obsession had turned ordinary streets into a stage for horror. And in the shadow of that memory, the question lingered endlessly. How many more Victor Harlows were hiding in plain sight, thinking no one would ever notice? The story of Victor Harlow reminds us that darkness can hide behind the most ordinary faces. A quiet suburban street, a polite neighbor, a routine life. None of it guaranteed safety. His obsession, meticulously planned and horrifyingly executed, left scars that Toronto will never forget. While justice has been served, the caution remains clear. Vigilance is essential, and appearances can be deceiving. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling true crime cases from Canada. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest mysteries uncovered.